My name is Dee Dee. The first 8 years of my life, I grew up in the Bronx. The next 8 years, I grew up in Brooklyn. When I was about 6 years old, one particular situation that affected me was when I was young, a lot of times I was, at people's houses and they would touch me. And being the product of child abuse and molestation for so long by different people also kind of, it shaped me into a person that accepted that this body wasn't mine. This body was to be used by others.
Life, journey, race, experience, time, often used to forget what it's like to endure and regret, until again we find ourselves rewalking a mile to learn the lesson we must stop for a while. Reflect, revisit, replenish, review, finding ways to make our souls anew. Building blocks.
My name is Dee Dee. The first 8 years of my life, I grew up in the Bronx. The next 8 years, I grew up in Brooklyn. Brooklyn, oh my goodness. It was definitely different from the Bronx. When I came to Brooklyn, I noticed that there wasn't a lot of trash on the floor. We moved to Sheepshead Bay. When I was younger, there was no place I'd rather be. It's everything is here. Everything. Well, we moved to Brooklyn with my mother's boyfriend, and he was Jewish. I didn't know that he was Jewish. I just thought he was a light-skinned Puerto Rican. It was really a weird transition for me. The first 8 years, growing up in the Bronx, living in the project, the Bronx was really fun. Brooklyn was definitely different. It was much more laid back. Living with my mom and dad was fun. My mom was the type of person that would have all sorts of animals in the house. And my dad was the type of person that he would bring stray animals home if he saw that they were hurting or needed medical assistance. He'd bring them home to my mom. She'd heal them, bring them back to good health, and then try to keep them. We had so many animals. My dad and I had a really tight relationship. We always joked. He had a really great sense of humor. He was always happy and always making silly faces and telling silly things. And people told me a lot of great stories about him. He passed away recently, but in him being sick in the hospital, I got to meet a lot of his friends from his childhood, and they said a lot of great things about him. And my son, he has inherited the silliness, and he's a great comedian, has a great sense of humor. He's bright, and he's cute too. And luxurious. He always says he's luxurious. I met Leah when she was working at a drugstore near my job, and I would go there. This is when digital cameras weren't the big thing, and I went to get some pictures developed of a party I'd attended, and when I got back to my office, I looked at the pictures, and there was a picture of me that had like this little black mark on my face. The picture was really sexy with the exception of this black dot on my face. So I went back and I specifically asked for her, so she came out and she had this like beautiful womanly shape. She was like, her, you know, from the back, even in her little schmuck, she looked great. So I asked her what happened to my picture. I said, you know, you developed these pictures for me, thank you, but there is a spot on this picture I want it done over. She was like, let me look at that. So she grabbed it. She was like, oh, I'm sorry, we don't fix ugly. So that right there got me hooked. But as soon as she said that smart comment, I just fell, I don't know, she grabbed me from that point on. So, you know, I went back there a couple of times, back and forth, and I eventually asked her on a date. And we went on our first date on July 1st, and we were inseparable from that time, because shortly after that was the 4th of July, and we celebrated the holiday in the summer together, and it was just like a whirlwind love, and it was just fun being with her. Eventually, I introduced her to my son, and that didn't really sit too well with him because, you know, all his life he's known his mom's dealt with men. And then all of a sudden there's this woman that he really, you know, I introduced her as my friend initially, and then when I had the conversation with him that she's more than a friend, I didn't see that he was hurt, but later on I did discover that he was. And so dealing with that was a difficult experience, but it was definitely a learning experience. And he just grew to accept it, and he loved her for all it was worth. Then, you know, we got into our 1 year and our 2 year. Leah and I got really close. We did so many fun, exciting things together. But within the first year of our relationship, my eyes began to wander. You know, after the first 6 months, I just started losing interest in a person. And my interest just waned. And they, you know, as usual, they did. And I started messing around with someone else. I think she suspected, but I never really took time to think that maybe she knows and maybe I'm doing the wrong thing and maybe it's hurting her. So I just kept doing what I was doing, coming home late, being with someone else, and I know she felt jealous, but she never like made a big deal about it, and I took that for granted. She knew I was cheating and she asked me to stop, and I said I wouldn't do it again, of course. But, you know, a year later, here I was again, you know, someone else piqued my interest, and this was someone at work. This was a relationship that I totally did not anticipate, and I was not, you know, it wasn't something that I planned on doing. And again, she was going through my email, and this guy has sent me a picture of him that was nude. And she saw this picture because, of course, I didn't delete it because I want to keep looking at pictures like that. So she saw it. She confronted me. Towards the last year of our relationship, I knew that I couldn't be with a woman for the rest of my life. I knew that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being a lesbian. That's not something that I knew I identified with or that I felt deep down inside. I knew that I strongly had an attraction for men. And I never considered myself bisexual. I just considered myself in love with this person. And I loved her. I loved her a lot. She's amazing, a wonderful, good person. And, you know, I shouldn't have led her to thinking that there was a possibility that we would be together forever. We had a great relationship, and I messed it up because, you know. When I was about 6 years old, I had very limited supervision. At times I would be sent up to various babysitters or whatever babysitter was willing to take care of me. You know, I enjoyed just being in anyone else's house but mine, because there was always something going on, like smoking weed and smoking cigarettes and drinking beers was the natural thing that would happen in anybody's house. But one particular situation that affected me was when I was young. A lot of times I was, you know, at people's houses and they would touch me. And there was another young boy there who was older than me. He was a teenager. He would call me into the room. He would have his pants down, and he told me to lay down and watch TV next to him. And I would. And then he'd tell me to get on top of him, and he'd have an erection. And I get on top of him, but naturally I was a virgin, so we couldn't, you know, do anything. But, you know, I rub on him, and he'd rub on me and fondle me. Every other time I went out there, this would happen. And there was one time when I was there, and I decided to go into his room, and he was just laying in bed watching TV. And I decided to pull his zipper down, and he was like, "Stop, pull it back up." And that went on a couple of times, and I didn't realize that his mother was watching us and watching me do that. So finally she came in the room and she said, "Come here, let me talk to you." And I went, and I went with her. She brought me in her room and she said, "You're not supposed to be doing that. That's not nice, and you better not do it again." She didn't say it as if she was angry, but she definitely was reprimanding me. And it was the first time I learned that that's something you're not supposed to do. My mom called me and told me that a friend of her boyfriend's son had passed away. He was fairly young and it was sudden. He wasn't sick. So I know this man since I was young, and I decided to give him a call. And about a week or two later, he returned the call and he wanted to go out and have some lunch. He was in the neighborhood by my job and said if I wanted to have a quick bite or a drink, we could meet up. He was up the block from me, so I agreed. We went to a diner. We sat down and we ate. He asked me if I wanted to drink. I'm not really much of a drinker, so I had one drink. And we started talking, and I noticed that as the time was passing, he had another and ordered me another, and I felt obligated to drink it. So he kept drinking and wanting to touch me. He started telling me how much he cared about me, and he always had a thing for me since I was a little girl. And I didn't really know how to take that. Like, I didn't know where to compartmentalize that statement. So as soon as he said I had a thing for you since you were little, I was just like, alrighty then, that's a little weird. But I didn't know how to extract myself from the situation in a diplomatic way. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, or, you know, it just seemed like it was a really sensitive time for him. So ultimately, after he finished having his final drink, we walked to the train station, and I'm basically holding him up because he's wasted at this time. He left, I left, and I was just like, phew. But on my way home, I couldn't help but think that my mom knew about this, that at some point, because when this man and I had the conversation, he actually said to me, my mom's boyfriend knows that I've always had a thing for you. And I realized that I wouldn't be surprised if my mom knew about this setup, and she probably not okayed it, but just didn't say, that's my daughter, you know, don't do that, you know, in some way or form, not even like physically protect me, but verbally stand up for me. And I didn't confront her, although like I let it sit in me, and I wanted to say something to my mother, but I knew no matter what I said, it wasn't gonna go anywhere. So I let them bring it up. And one day we're at the dinner table, and my mother's boyfriend says, "Oh, I heard you met up with," First time I got high was when I was in high school. I was about 16 years old. Some friends that were out of high school already had invited me and another one of my friends / classmates over to his house to have some drinks. It was the first time I had ever had any alcohol or smoked marijuana. We smoked and drank some night train, and I was so high. The guy had a cake in his refrigerator for his aunt. It was her birthday, and it was a special order cake. And I had the munchies, and I just took my hand and was like, cake! Ate the cake. We went upstairs and tried to clean my shirt and my pants, my arm, everything was full of cake. Clean it off, and then some guy comes in the bathroom and he's trying to kiss me, and I'm like, get off of me, get off of me. And I just knew at that point, like, I didn't want anybody touching me. I didn't want this guy putting his hands, his penis, his tongue, his lips, and nothing on me. At the dinner table, you know, we're all sitting there, and he directly said it to me. I heard you met up with yeah, I met up with him. So I proceeded to tell them how meeting up with him went. And I said, you know, he tried to kiss me a couple of times, you know that? And I'm looking at my mom, and I'm looking at her boyfriend, and her boyfriend laughs. He goes, ah, that oh. And my mother laughs. And I didn't find it funny. I still don't find it funny. I just find it disappointing that my mom doesn't have that automatic maternal instinct to protect her child. You know, I'm in my 30s. I don't expect my mom to protect me, but I do. You know, because I've always wanted that protection from her, and I still want that. I'm still looking for it because I never got it from her. My childhood impacted the way I reacted to Leah in the way that I didn't know how to take what I had and make the best use out of it. Love exactly what's right here in my hand, what's in front of me. Appreciate it, you know, nurture it, and grow it into something that's more beautiful than it already is. When I saw Leah hurt and crying, I felt bad for her, but I didn't feel, I couldn't like imagine her pain. I mean, I looked at her, but I was looking at her outside of the situation. Like, I wanted to feel like when I saw her crying, I wanted to cry with her, but I couldn't feel her hurt and her pain. And because I couldn't feel her hurt and her pain, that's why I did it again. As a child, I never witnessed anyone being together, monogamous in a relationship. That impacted that relationship. But also, I think being the product of child abuse and molestation for so long by different people also kind of, it shaped me into a person that accepted that this body wasn't mine. This body was to be used by others. My body is basically a library book, and this was something that's, you know, given to me to lend out. So I didn't know that, you know, this is something that's precious. You know, as an adult, I'm learning these things. You know, in my 30s, I'm just now learning these things, and these are actually things that I'm teaching myself. Like, it comes to me in my mind, like, you know, you don't have to do this. You don't have to let, you know, because you're hanging out with a guy that's drunk and he's attracted to you, and you have no attraction for him, but he won't stop trying to make out with you. So you have to just kiss him just to You let him get his satisfaction on his rocks off and let him go. You don't have to do that. And you know, up until this time, I felt like that was something that I had to do, because that's what, as a child, I grew up learning. I grew up learning that, you know, it's okay if somebody wants to touch you. It's okay if more than one body wants to touch you. Nobody thinks it's wrong. Nobody's gonna say anything. Nobody, you know. So that was how I learned. That was how I raised myself. I'm still looking for like mommy to protect her daughter. And it just saddens me, it hurts, because no matter what the situation is, from being a little kid to being molested to being an adult woman to men trying to take advantage of me, no matter how many times she hears of it, whether it's from me or whether it's from someone else, she won't do anything about it. It triggers anger. Mostly because I know if my father knew about any of this, anything like, you know, from being a little girl to being an adult, if he caught wind of any of this, my father will probably do everything in this world to hurt that person. Maybe that's why everything was always so hush-hush, and my mother thought she was protecting me by not telling anyone or doing anything about it. I don't really know, but it doesn't make sense to me. But protection is, to me, it's also a display of love. When you love something, you do everything you can to protect it. And now living with, you know, in the same home as my mom, I rent an apartment from her. I still want some display of protection, some sign that she loves me that much. I mean, I know my mom loves me, but I feel like there's no special love, like a mother-daughter love. Sometimes I just say I could live without the love and protection, but sometimes I feel really bad that I never had it, and I still don't. And I feel bad that I still want it. I think the reason that I overdo it with my son sometimes, and he probably gets annoyed with me, is because I never want my son to be anyone's victim.